Longevity Lifestyle Designers. This is Gavin here with secretsoflongevity.com. There's 5 nuts and seeds which I believe, personally, in my opinion, are the best ones you can include in your diet. I'm not saying don't consume other types. I'm just saying gravitate towards these ones because they're the most nutrient dense and they have a lot of unique nutrients that are deficient in people's diets, generally speaking anyways. Plus, they're also the nuts and seeds with this lowest amount of damaging nutrients. So that could be enzyme and protein inhibitors that a lot of nuts and seeds and beans have. So I'm speaking more broadly here. Basically, every nut, seed, grain, and bean is sort of the same part of a plant. It's the reproductive organ of a plant. And they all contain various types of anti-nutrients. And to get rid of these, we generally need to soak them and then wash away and rinse away after 12, 24, or even more numbers of hours. Wash away that leftover liquid, and then we can either consume them or dehydrate them if we want to keep them longer. Or in the case of some beans and grains, it's better to sprout and or ferment them in addition to just soaking them. And this just allows the proteins that are in these foods to be more absorbable. I generally don't recommend the consumption of a lot of beans and grains, but for the purpose of this video, we're focusing more on the nuts and seeds, which have a higher fat and protein content as compared to beans and grains generally. But like I'm saying, these are all the same parts of different plants. They've just been given different names because of the differences in size, in what macronutrients are in them. So just focusing on nuts and seeds, which are really the only ones I recommend consuming in any decent amount regularly. I sometimes consume grains. It's not the end of the world if you do, if you prepare them properly. But the other thing to watch out for in nuts and seeds is high polyunsaturated fat content. So we're talking mostly the more inflammatory omega-6s, which a lot of people have way too many in their bodies from a diet that is high in omega-6s. There's various types of omega-6s, the main one being the most inflammatory. And then getting too much omega-3 is an issue as well because both omega-6 and omega-3 wreak havoc on the thyroid. It wreaks havoc on the thyroid. A lot of people have thyroid issues these days with low metabolism, and that leads to weight gain, which you definitely see as very commonplace. So all that being said, hope you can stick with it. We're going to go over my top 5 of these nuts and seeds. Topping the list at number 1 is going to be the best for men. Women can consume it as well. They need everything that's in there, but it's particularly good for men because it's great for prostate health, and that is the pumpkin seed. It is very rich in zinc, has a number of unique compounds that are very good for prostate health, reproductive health overall, so women can benefit from it as well. Out of all these nuts and seeds, it's the one with the highest protein score, meaning the most protein usability from it. Hemp seeds would definitely rival it, but from what I can see, the data shows that it is more abundant in protein that can be usable. It contains uniquely chlorophyll and vitamin K, something you only find in leafy greens, but it does have a green component to the seed, and that is used by our bodies, and we get the benefits from that. It's also, out of all these nuts and seeds, one of the highest in magnesium. But when you compare it to the ones outside of the top 5, it's by and large much higher. We're talking just 1 small ounce gives you almost 40% of your daily requirements for magnesium. So an ounce would just be like a small palmful or medium to full palmful. It's also rich in zinc, manganese, copper, so a lot of these things which they're minerals we need, but not everyone gets an abundance of them in their diet. And by the way, on the vitamin K, you're getting about 18 to 20% if you're consuming just a palmful a day, and it's very easy to work that into your diet. I'm not saying you need to eat it every day or if it's even advisable to do that, but working it in regularly as a condiment, and I always recommend using nuts and seeds as condiments, not staple foods, for a good reason, because of the polyunsaturated fat content. And this is a way of getting these things in a greater abundance, a lot of the mineral density that we find in nuts and seeds. Number 2 on this list, and I am doing the list in order of what, in my opinion, is the best to the 5th best, because these are all some of the best nuts and seeds. And number 2 on the list is going to be cacao beans. They're a nut, they're not really a bean, because they have that higher fat content. And the unique thing that you're going to see in each item that's on this list is that they're all very high in magnesium. So I came about and created this list because I was looking for foods rich in magnesium. I've seen a lot of people get benefits from adding magnesium-rich foods to their diet. Many people are deficient in magnesium because the soils of our planet, everywhere on the planet, are very depleted in magnesium, with the one exception of one country, which is Egypt, which has a very high abundance of magnesium in the soils because of the Nile overflowing and making their crops very fertile. Magnesium, you can read about it if you want to on an individual basis, and it's extremely beneficial and important and key for virtually every tissue and cell in the body. Anything from muscle cramps to fatigue to inability to get strong, sturdy bone structures. There's going to be some component to that is going to be due to a lack of magnesium. Typically, we're going to be getting an abundance of it if we're eating enough greens, but having some of these nuts and seeds in there is really good as well. So chocolate, otherwise known as the cacao bean. This is the whole bean that it first comes in, but you're going to be getting this from raw chocolate, cooked chocolate, cacao powder, cacao beans, cacao nibs, chocolate chips. Basically, the darker it is and the less sugar and stuff added to it, the better, but you're still going to be getting the magnesium whether it's cooked or not. There's a lot of benefits to consuming cacao in its raw state, which I highly recommend, as opposed to going for the more commercialized, scuzzier, hybridized, just generally not optimal cacao or chocolate you find in most products. So if you go for an heirloom type of cacao, or raw cacao, you're going to be getting higher antioxidant levels, and in general chocolate's very rich in antioxidants. The woman who's on record for living the longest in the world consumed 2 pounds of chocolate per week, dark baker's chocolate, and that's Jean Louise Calment. And it's also very rich in, like I was saying, the polyphenols. It's also very rich in a number of compounds that really boost our brain chemistry, make us feel good, increase dopamine, increase serotonin, basically give us all the building blocks to a healthy brain chemistry. And that is very important in a stressful world, in a world where we encounter things that constantly sort of impinge on our ability to be present, calm, and healthy. You also have a tremendous amount of copper, a little bit of zinc, manganese. Again, a lot of nuts and seeds have a decent amount of zinc, magnesium, manganese, and copper. It's an interesting, and phosphorus actually as well. It's a sort of a group of minerals that is particularly abundant in nuts and seeds. In these top 5, it's very rich in all of them. You also have the unique mineral of chromium being very high in cacao, chocolate, and that is very important for maintaining blood sugar levels and very key and something that's deficient in diabetics. So as long as you have a lot of that, technically you're going to have a very good blood sugar profile. Another great thing in cacao or chocolate is the sulfur compounds. These are very building for the hair, the nails, and very enriching for the skin overall. And that's why chocolate's a beauty superfood. It's a bone superfood. It's a superfood for the teeth. It fights cavities in that it kills the bacteria on the teeth that would cause cavities. Obviously, if you load it with sugar, that's going to have the opposite effect, but generally dark chocolate is going to have that ability to do that. You also have a ton of iron. It's the nut with the highest iron content of any nut or seed. So if you're vegan or you don't have a good source of iron in your diet, then definitely get some chocolate in there. Number 3 on the list is hemp seed. Some people would see number 4 on the list as being better than this, but after looking at it specifically for the magnesium content, which was what made me shift on this, hemp seed by the ounce has more magnesium than number 4. Hemp does have more than number 1 on the list, the pumpkin seeds, but there's a lot more going for the pumpkin seeds in my opinion than hemp. Hemp is very rich in protein, very easily digestible protein. Has a lot of the same protein that egg whites have, and people know egg whites are extremely easily digestible. So 1 ounce of hemp seeds gives you 45% of your daily intake of magnesium. That's just incredible. So you don't want to be relying on, again, on these things for staples. I always talk about using these things as condiments, thinking of nuts and seeds as condiments. I just want to throw that in there again because it's important to remind people about that. And part of the reason is that hemp seeds is quite rich in omega-3 and 6 fatty acids. These are wonderful in getting a certain amount of them, but if you're eating a lot of this, you're going to be getting oversaturation of it, and it's going to be impeding the balance in our bodies of saturated fat to polyunsaturated, monounsaturated fat that we have stored up in the tissues. The unique thing about hemp, though, is that the omega-6s, well, it's about a 4-to-1 ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 omega-3. A lot of the omega-6 is the unique omega-6, which is not inflammatory. It's actually anti-inflammatory, and that's ganolinoleic acid, or GLA. And it's unique in that it's only found in breast milk, spirulina. There's like maybe 2 or 3 other things that I've only ever heard of it being found in. Borage seed oil is another one, or borage seeds. But hemp seed is a decent source of it, and it's extremely rare. When your body gets it, it's going to use it and hold on to it. And it's an important one to get in there at some points and somewhat regularly. So that's one way to get it in there. It also gives us a little more than 20% of our daily requirement for zinc. By the way, the daily requirement for zinc, in my opinion, is a little low, so all the zinc we can get, the better. Hemp seeds also has a little bit of chlorophyll, vitamin K, and even silica in there because of the green component that you can see on the seed. So it's a way to get an infinitesimally small amount more of greens in your diet when you're eating nuts and seeds, I guess. Number 4 on the list is going to be chia seed. As number 4, chia seed is wonderful in that it has a much better profile of omega-3 and omega-6. It's very high in omega-3s and about 1/4 to 1/5 the amount of omega-6s. So that's actually the reverse of hemp seed in that it's much higher in omega-3s. So when we're consuming that, we're helping the overall balance if you happen to be someone that is coming out of sort of a mainstream diet where you're getting way too many omega-6s from vegetable oils, excess grain and bean consumption, consumption of animal foods, fed grains and beans, which then causes the animal tissue to be imbalanced and not having enough omega-3s and omega-6s. So overall, it's going to be much more anti-inflammatory than foods high in omega-6s. It also is an extremely great source of soluble fiber. So if you put chia seed into water, about the ratios to get it perfect is about 1 to 9, but you can do anywhere from 1 to 2 to 1 to 10, and you're going to have the chia seed plump up, turn into like little mini tapioca pearls in the water, and that can be used to make pudding. It can be consumed on its own just to be something that can help you stay regular. It can be blended into drinks, or you can add it to drinks without having to do that, and it'll plump up while the drink is blending, somewhat while it's in your digestive system. And soluble fiber is much less harmful to the bowels than insoluble fiber, which is much more crystalline and jagged as it goes through. It causes micro tears in our digestive system. So chia seed has a decent amount of manganese, a decent amount of phosphorus. 1 ounce gives us about 20% of our daily requirements for calcium, but it doesn't give us a ton of magnesium. It gives us probably less than 20%, 15, even less perhaps. So the other nuts and seeds are richer in that, that's why it's higher on the list, but you're still getting a little bit from that. So it's traditionally used by the Mayans as a fuel source. They'd consume it while the messengers would run between cities, very long distance marathon, ultra marathons essentially, and this is what they would use on those runs because it was very light to carry and can give you a little bit of a consistent fuel while on their journey. It's also complete and easily digestible protein like all the other ones on this list. Finally, number 5 on the list is Brazil nuts. Brazil nuts made it because it was actually the first thing I was looking at as being very high in magnesium. It gives us just over 25% of our daily requirements for magnesium in just 1 ounce, which is approximately 6 Brazil nuts. Gives us an excruciatingly high amount of selenium. It's the richest source of selenium, I believe, of any food. The 6 nuts would give you almost 800% of your daily requirements. So literally 1 nut, 1 Brazil nut gives you your daily requirements for selenium. You could make it a practice to just eat 1 Brazil nut a day and you'll never be deficient in selenium. You don't want to eat a large amount of that constantly while your body can deal with excess nutrients coming from whole foods quite easily. When you're consistently doing that, it can be a bit of a burden on the body. So if you were to eat large amounts of them at some point, avoid it for a little bit, I guess. And another wonderful thing about it is that it's very high in saturated fat. And this is the much more ideal fat. And by the way, I didn't mention this, but chocolate is also very high in saturated fat, much more so than the polyunsaturated fat, which is less desirable. So the Brazil nut is very high in saturated fat, less so of the mono and polyunsaturated fat, which is, again, more harmful to the thyroid. And we want to protect the thyroid as it's a very sensitive and easily harmed gland in today's environment with what's going on the planet. So overall, it's an anti-inflammatory nut. and that's because of that saturated fat content. It's also very rich in copper. That's another one that is high in phosphorus, as most nuts and seeds are. So, hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know what your favorite nut or seed is in the comments below. Another one that would be number 6 on the list, and it didn't make it, is the coconut. I'm sort of going by the ounce when I was looking at nutrient density of these foods, and coconut, people generally eat a lot more of a coconut at once, which would give you plenty of nutrients, but by the ounce it's not as nutrient dense as these other ones. I almost think of coconuts as a different thing just because they're so nutritionally different as compared to other nuts and seeds that they're sort of in a realm of their own that could almost be considered more like an animal food. Share and rate the video if you feel so inclined, and with that I'll talk to you later. Take care and embrace life without limits.